Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of Healing Conversations with Ingrid Gunby and my co-host Gloria Lybecker. Today we're going to be talking about the experience of being maligned or misunderstood and the circuitry that can get activated in us when that happens, and how we can harness the protective power of the rage circuit to galvanize action in protection of ourselves and those that we care about, while still staying in relationship with ourselves and with others. So we're hoping that this will be a conversation that will really resonate with a whole lot of people, and it'll be helpful in understanding the difference between rage and predatory aggression and the way that that can manifest.
Yeah, it's quite an experience to actually have in your life. And a lot of our viewers may have something popping up for them already. But I know in my experience that happened in small community. And so there was the experience that's added when you're in a group setting, it can feel more impactful. And when you believe you've presented yourself authentically, and what comes back to you is something that feels really incongruent. I know my initial reaction was more of shock and then shame, and then grappling into, well, where am I? What's my solid ground underneath me?
Yeah, so there's very much in your example there, the experience of being blindsided by being maligned and misunderstood when you thought you had been in community and expressing yourself in a way that was both authentic and clear.
Yeah. And so being able to stay in the conversation, if you fall into panic and grief, then it's not a place of empowerment, really, because to fall into the panic or grief, just to touch upon it, we need to be met right there and held there, be accompanied in order to process that, in order to let that flow. Another thing that can happen is people can fall into a fear, because if it feels as if people are turning away from us, it can really spark us, not just the panic and grief, but the fear circuit of being alone. I guess that's more the panic grief, still the alarmed aloneness. Or maybe it's the fear of reputation, that what people are going to think about you that aren't true.
Yeah, and sometimes a very real fear of being cut off from resources that we actually need. Not just our connection resources, but I'm thinking about my own example that I've sort of been mulling over and preparing for this call. Which was at a really vulnerable time of my life where my kids were small and I was needing support and understanding with what was going on for my son. My daughter was a baby, and when that process kind of went wrong and I had the experience of being really misunderstood and maligned and talked about, but not engaged with, a really real fear that I had was being cut off from the resources and support that I might need in order to be able to support my son. And that's a little different from the panic grief of being alone. It's a different sort of survival challenge.
Yeah, it creates a sense of scricity, that there won't be enough. What are you going to do?
Yeah. Particularly in we were living in a small city, so perhaps a slightly larger community, but actually not a lot of options in terms of where to go for support.
Oh, right.
So
limited resources.
That's right. And if you screw it up here, then where are you going?
So again, kind of that fear that there's going to be a reputation, that there's going to be a story about you that doesn't truly represent, it's not congruent with who you are. Yeah, and how to be with that.
Yeah.
And
that story's out there circulating, and is influencing how people are responding to you, but you have no, there's no option for you to engage in conversation with those people because they've already made up their minds, and you don't even know who knows the story that is circulating. So it's really distressing.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what can happen with that, and I guess holding both sides, where when you have that experience, now this story is circulating. And I guess a lot of it depends upon what's the flavor of that story that's circulating.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and then how that impact is upon you and your family, or your community, and how to be with that, and how to still stand strong in who you are.
Yeah.
How do you stay in the conversation?
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if the rage circuitry actually kind of showed up in your life and supported you.
I think it did. This is quite a long time ago, and certainly it showed up in the sense that I was able to, and this would actually, as soon as I think about this, this would be quite typical of me at the time. So what happened was that I was able to put in a boundary in protection of my son and of our family, with someone who was doing an assessment of him, and who was very much, and as I experienced her, kind of wedded to her role as the expert. And so she was up here and we were down here, and she was not going to talk about any of her thoughts about what might be happening. My perception was that she was seeing my son as this fascinating case rather than as a little person in a family of people, and that there was some kind of
judgments,
kind of human obligation to be in relationship with these people. So when that was not happening, and even after very specific requests to communicate differently with us, she refused to do that, I put in a boundary and said, well, I'm not prepared to continue this process at this time. So that very much was coming from the rage circuitry in its beautifully protective kind of motivation.
Yeah, because there were several needs that were not being acknowledged. Several needs for your child as well as your family, and also an unwillingness to be met there. And so I love how it empowered you. So there's an empowerment that comes from slowing our own experience down to be able to identify what those are. And to take
and I guess I think, though, when I reflect back on that time, the rage circuit in its hot manifestation, the protective rage circuit was certainly operating, but at the same time, I would have been moving in and out of probably both panic, grief, and fear. And the fear would have been in relation to, is my son going to be okay? That would probably have been the core of the fear part. And the panic grief was more about being isolated and cut off from support and community around my son and his struggles and our struggles as a family to support him. So
Well, so even acknowledging the
mm,
potential loss that you
yeah.
experienced, you know,
Mm,
and
mm,
so there's sorrow, there's sadness there,
mm,
and
mm,
feeling alone with it, that there
mm,
wasn't accompaniment alongside of you with that.
mm, mm,
Mm,
mm. Yeah, and to be clear, you know, probably that would be true in the sort of professionals who were around us, not in the family or kind
yeah,
of friend network. So that,
yeah,
you know, I just want to clarify that. But I think, you know, the really painful part for me was probably not so much the interaction with the assessor and putting in that boundary. It was what happened after that, which was that
mm,
the preschool that my son was attending, the staff, the you know, manager and his
mm,
dedicated person, you know,
mhm.
early childhood educator, just did this from
Mm.
both him and me,
So they
and
withdrew.
just went cold.
Mm,
Um, and nothing was ever overtly said, but it was made very clear that I had not done the thing that they thought I should have done,
yeah,
and that therefore I was going to be
awesome.
ostracized.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what was coming up for me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's very painful too. It's a type of abandonment. And
Mm,
yet just acknowledging when somebody has like a sense of coldness,
mm,
maybe contempt or dismissal, like you were dismissed,
mm.
that comes from predatory aggression.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were talking a little before we came on the recorded part of this call about, you know, how do we know the difference between predatory aggression and rage,
Yeah.
protective rage? Because I think a lot of us get confused about the difference.
Mm.
So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, because I know you've been really thinking about this, really reflecting on it. Talk a little bit about how you understand the difference between those and how we can tell in our own experience.
Yeah, well,
One or the other.
what I find to be most supportive is to drop into my body because our body's wisdom really, there's just so much wisdom there when we can access it. And so, first, like you did name before, that the rage circuit is hot. So there's a hotness, there's a yelling or shaking with rage, you know, there's just this, oh, so there's the way it feels in the system.
Mm,
And then there's the predatory aggression is more cold, it's more removed,
mm,
and mm, it's like a cat and a mouse, watching the mouse to see what it's going to do
mm,
so I can pounce just at the right moment.
mm,
And so there's
mm,
some planning maybe that's going on about what they're going to do and when they're going to do it, and they really get a hit of dopamine from it too. You know,
mm.
it can give them it feels good.
Yeah.
It's kind of like malice and getting even.
Yes. And there can be
Yeah,
a kind of a shared hit too when this is happening in a
yeah.
group. There's a sort of a uh,
Well,
there's
people
an
can jump on board because they don't want it to be pointed at them.
yeah, that's right.
So they'd rather
Mm,
point it than to have it pointed at. And that's how
mm,
you get rid of predatory aggression. If it came at me, then if I
mm,
turn to somebody else, then it's a ricochet or a relay. It's a relay.
mm, mm,
I guess there used to be like an old cartoon where the dad got yelled at by the boss. He came home and yelled at the mom. She got mad at her son, and he got
yeah,
mad at his sister. So she went out and kicked the dog. I mean, so it's like how it goes down
yeah.
in line. And there's research that shows that with the primates, how this predatory aggression comes out.
Mm,
And
mm,
yeah, so it's just fascinating information to recognize when we can slow down and tune into the felt sense of our experience, it can
mm.
inform us around what's actually happening
Yeah,
within.
yeah, yeah. So you're really stressing the value of slowing down, coming into our bodies,
Yeah.
And even if all we notice to start with is it hot or cold,
Yes.
that's
Yes,
going to be useful information. Yeah.
it is. So, well, so that we can, and I want to do that for myself so that I can be in full choice.
Yeah.
I don't want to just be run by my own unconscious patterns. I would like to be as conscious as possible. And when I can slow down to be with the hotness, I can start to drop in and I can start to name, well, what are the needs that are alive right here? Because anger represents so many needs are not being met right now. So I need fuel in order to be able to take action. And so it can really bring us a sense of agency into the world.
Yeah.
And,
But only if we can slow it down enough to identify what those needs are.
Exactly.
And figure out how to direct the anger. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or we can just make it worse.
Yeah, that's right. Because I'm sort of thinking that, and this is, possibly a surprising concept for some people, because for many of us, anger is so kind of taboo that we don't even want to kind of engage with it, right? But certainly also we've had an experience of anger being destructive of relationships. Whereas I think what we're trying to highlight here is that rage that's expressed in service of important needs can be very relational. Actually, it doesn't have to take us out of relationship at all. Rage that without the sort of the pause to reflect on what are the unmet needs here and what action can I actually take, that's in service of relationship.
And
predatory aggression or just explosive rage, not so much.
No, not at all. Predatory aggression is not relational at all. No. And so I guess the one way that predatory aggression has been accepted in our society would be actually in kind of in combination with the play circuit. So you look at sports, competitive sports, because it brings kind of a hunter quality. There's a keenness of eye and there's a noticing of the whole field. Also, when people really love hunting, another kind of so I mean, and that brings in the cat and mouse again. What does that look like? And people have seen that most likely. It can be kind of playful. I've seen cats, they do play with their mice, but the other thing that I was going to say, if I can come back into it, is that with the rage circuitry, that we are really needing to honor our anger, to recognize what it represents, because if we diminish our anger, our rage circuitry, we diminish all of our circuitries. It goes across the board. And that's really important for people to know is true. And so it's not in service of our life to diminish it or to deny it. It really is, it's a call for attention. There's something alive here that needs attention, and to be willing to pay attention to it for ourselves so that we can be empowered to be congruent with what we value.
And then moving to making a specific request of the other, or to set a boundary, I guess.
To be able to stay in the conversation and to be a representative of the beautiful needs that are alive, whether we are placing protection around someone else or around ourselves or around the community. It's important. It's really important to be able to have a voice that is clear and that is very, well, when we have clear requests, it directs the conversation to consider others. And another thing that's important skill set is in those, when you are being perceived like you're just a difficult person, how can you continue to have a conversation that honors the relationship with the other, that stays curious and interested and wanting to understand what's driving the behavior of this other person. Where are they in their world? And to be curious about that in order to invite a conversation that can become relational.
Yeah. But
And it
as
may
you
not
talk
be.
about, sorry, as you're talking about that, I'm just struck by how when we do that, when we are able to remain curious about it and invite conversation, we are disrupting a power dynamic. Because when we are positioned as a difficult person, then the person who's doing that positioning is adopting a position of power over us, from which they can label us a difficult person. And when we're able to stay kind of curious, then we, without doing anything overt, we're actually refusing to be in that position of relatively less power. We're putting it here and requesting and pursuing a relational interaction where we are equal.
Yeah, so rather than falling into the victim stance, because the predator over us, we're able to stand on solid ground of knowing ourselves and our own intention and being our own advocate.
Yeah.
By being able to select the words that invite that honesty. So transparency is super helpful.
Yeah. And I'm thinking too that what that invites, if we can come to here, is and I don't mean kind of doing this in a super direct way necessarily, but it does invite awareness on the part of the person who's positioned us as difficult or, bad or wrong, of what it is that might be going on for them. What are the feelings and needs that are sitting there for them that they are not able to acknowledge, that's shifting them into needing to blame or needing to project or get rid of the distress by directing it at us and making us wrong. Because underneath predatory aggression is, that impulse to, I suppose it's experienced, in our communities a lot, is blame. I need to put blame somewhere else. Yeah.
And for me, the way that I have found it's possible is to first, am I able to recognize that I am being blamed? And when I can recognize that I'm being blamed here, and when I can touch into my heart energy, it can open up a place to find a way to seek connection in ways I might not have before. And that, for me, that is only possible when I am heart connected and with life energy, in order to kind of create a little cushion around my own inner experience and to be curious and just make some guesses around what this person might need acknowledgement of, around how it is for them. What is it that they're wanting to be able to, why is this so hard for them? What's underneath that? So looking underneath that mat, so to speak, of where they are, what is it they wish for? What is it that they want to see happening? What's not here that they're actually in arms about? And I can start to see them as human anyway, even if they're not being relational. I can recognize where they are in their nervous system. I can have compassion for that. But only if I'm connected.
And I guess I'm thinking, in the example that we were working with before of my experience when my son was young, I could from this vantage point, certainly wasn't really able to do it at the time, but I might guess that the staff at the daycare centre
Mm.
were really longing for kind of well-being for my son,
Mm.
and feeling grief and distress at their not being able to perhaps help him or relate to him in a way that they could relate to other children in the
Mhm.
centre. They might have been feeling fearful for his future,
Mhm.
and potentially because I think it would be true that some of this started to change in the time that he was at the centre, which, is not uncommon for kids on the spectrum, that it shows up and starts to manifest, at
Yeah.
around the age that he would have been then. They may have felt some grief at the loss of
Mhm.
a relationship that they had, particularly for his
Mhm.
designated teacher. And so, when I kind of explore that possibility, I am in a very different and very much more relational place with even thinking about them than I am if I'm just in the
Mm.
I need to put a boundary around this in order to protect me and my son. And I'm also kind of trying to stay away from panic, grief, and fear of my own. If I can come back here, I can still have the boundary, but I can also be open to the feelings and needs that they might have been experiencing.
Yeah, and as you are demonstrating, that's only possible when you take the time to slow it down and reflect upon your own experience and start to unpack what are those needs. It opens you up to being able to then offer that to someone else.
Yeah,
And that's the
yeah,
invitation for, yeah, authentic
yeah,
connection.
yeah.
Mm.
And I think the thing about that too, because I know a lot of people are kind of like, yeah, but what if I tried to have that conversation with them and they just wouldn't go there? And it's like, well, yeah, that would be disappointing. but actually it doesn't change in some ways. It doesn't change how it sits within me. Like I can still sit in a softer place with it, even if they're not able to have a conversation that brings us back into relationship.
True. And so then there's a new choice point that opens up.
Mm.
Blame happens when we think someone had a choice and they made the wrong one.
Yeah,
So we want to punish them for it.
yeah, that's
And
right.
so, I mean, that's where punitive um, orientation comes from. And when we can slow it down and we can really recognize as humans that there are many times where we actually are choiceless, we can start to have more compassion. But the first choice is to slow down, to be within ourselves and our own experience, and to
Yeah.
model that that's possible, especially when we are representing our children. They need to model that that's possible. And if someone else closes the door and they're not willing to choose relationship, then what it does is it actually allows us then to pivot to see, well, what other explorations are there? Because there are infinite possibilities when we're not just staying attached to only one. So, yeah, that can be a hard lesson when we really, really, really wanted a specific outcome. And yet, what a lovely practice to begin as early as possible, to be open to possibilities and to be flexible and adaptable. And that, in my experience, is a good practice. If I'm not practicing it, it's not so accessible. Yeah.
And I suppose maybe there's, in that practice, what also develops is a fluency of access to the rage circuitry without getting kind of stuck in it.
Or being scared of it. Yeah.
Yeah, or being scared of it. That's right. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
if we've
Yeah.
if we've been withholding it for so long, some of us may think, well, it'll just erupt and it will just destroy so much. So we're scared of our own rage. And so we really do need accompaniment to
Mm.
actually get to know ourselves
Yeah.
and have a safe space where we can explore that.
Mm. Mm.
So if there's people that are wanting to explore this material more deeply, Ingrid, how can they reach out to you?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is via the website, www.potent.co.nz, or ingridgunby.com. Take you to the same place, and you can, from there, you can call or send an email. You can also see a little bit more of a description about the work that I do, and see if that resonates with you. And I'd love to hear from you. Yeah. How about you, Gloria?
Yeah, so they can reach me on my website as well at healingyousanctuary.com. And there's, again, a place where you can explore different possibilities. And one is just to schedule a free consultation where we can have a conversation. Yeah.
Lovely.
Well, thank you for this exploration today. It's always a rich, satisfying conversation with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a pleasure. Oh, see you next time.
All right. Bye.
Yeah. Bye-bye.